Thank you, everyone. Today, I'd like to present my research with the title Capital City Relocation Plan in Indonesia, Impacts to Land Access Arrangement. This is the outline of my presentation. From production, theoretical framework, this question, and also I'd like to share my results. This introduction, as we know that Indonesian government is now establishing a new capital city located in East Kalimantan province, moving from the current capital city Jakarta. The initial development of the new capital city has been started by August 2022, and it will be expected to be finished by 2025. The initial development now still basic infrastructures, road, water facilities, settlement, and also presidential palace. However, the new capital city construction might lead to land conflict, especially with farmers and local customary communities, and also other land users such as plantation companies, coal mining, and also palm oil plantation. In this study, I'm going to use for theoretical framework. The first is land territorialization. In short, land territorialization is like an effort to build or maintain territory. So the establishment of the new capital city is also form of territorialization, and it will affect land users in the area. And the one is theory of access. Basically, the definition of access is the ability to benefit from things, including material object, person, and in this case, the ability to benefit from land. So, with the theory of access, the impact of territorialization to the benefit of land from the land user can be fully understood. And the third one is powers of exclusion. The definition of exclusion is like we want to know that land conflict due to territorialization can lead to the exclusion of the land users. So in this framework, there are four powers that causing land user excluded from the land. The first is regulation, and second one force, the market, and legitimation. And the last one is sense of place. The establishment of this project, like capital city, can lead to land exclusion, which in turn affecting the emotional attachment of the land users. So we have four research questions here. The first is what were the dominant form of land use in the area affected by the new capital city establishment? What were the prevailing access arrangement? The second question is how have land access arrangement changed since the announcement of the new capital city establishment? How have this been shaped by the form of territorialization? What sets of actors the land exclusion and how? The last one is how have changes in territorialization access the sense of place of the local community in the area. The location of the research network is the location where the establishment of capital city conducted. It is in East Kalimantan province of Indonesia, and I did the field work in 5 villages. The first village here, the most affected area is the establishment of infrastructure can be conducted in this area. So the first two villages here is the most affected by the establishment, and in the next two villages of there are only several sporting facilities in this area, and the last village here is there is no establishment at all. But I will see what's going on there. It will be so in the data collection, I use case study and field work. the work and the interview with villagers and also the farmers, local people, and also the government institution from village level to central government. So we did interview from village, some district, provincial, and central government. And also I did some focused activity and also participant participation. Now we move to the result of my study. As you can see here, there are many territories in this area. So this is the capital city, and how many territories already here. But I would like to show you the history of each of the territory. So the first territorialization was conducted in 1970, when the last area of Spartan, the sub-district, was territorialized as the forest area. Forest area is a state land owned by the state, controlled by the state. So in 1970s, because of this area was used for forest product, mainly goods, commercial goods are already here. So in the 1970s, there was a local government project in this area and also this area here. So mainly the last proportion of area become the forest area, state land. However, before 1970, there were global people here, namely Pasig people. They are originally Kalimantan people. They live in this area. Only they occupy the upper river area, because this area is the main forest and a lot of rivers here, at least 19 rivers around this area. So the local people mainly practicing shifting silviculture. So when they open the new forest, planting upland pines, and then they move to next season, they move to the other area, opening the land, and etc. And then the next territorialization is the creation of the settlement area here, which conducted in 1975. There was a transmigration program. So transmigration program is moving people from populated areas such as Java Island to Kalimantan, Sumatera, and Sulawesi. So these people that are mainly that we have agricultural land in Java. So they transferred to this location. They were given 2 hectares of land, they create settlement here. So the program finished by 1995. It's almost 20 years. They created this area outside the state line. In 1995, there was a plantation company start to operate here, taking over the working area because the forest was degraded, and the government decided to establish plantation forest in 1995. And the logging area moved to this area outside of Spartan here. So this become the family is still operating right now. Plantation forest in the area. And then began in 2005. The park might be operating outside state land, operating in this area, also some of this area. They are involving local farmers, so they is some cooperation. One oil has their own land, also it's mandatory for the federal government to build, establish palm oil company, and also including local people by asking them to get a plant palm oil. And then in 2010, coal mining began. Coal mining operating can be operated in forest area and also can be operated outside forest area. So they can operate legally. They can operate in this area, but also some illegal coal mining there. And then in 2019, the government decided to create this area as new capital city. So in this slide, I like to show you the impact of the new capital city establishment to the local people, especially in one of the village in Sepatu sub-district. Gomeroi village is the most affected area by the infrastructure development. In this village, the customary passive people who live in the outside of transit zone, and the local people, passive people living outside here, they are the most affected community by the establishment of the capital city. They normally receive compensation by the government, but they use the compensation to buy other agricultural plots or agricultural land in other areas. They cannot buy the land here because price is going up and they cannot buy. So they need to move basically to other sub-district. So this process resulted in a shift in structural and relational mechanism from inheritance to capital-based by acquiring land. So they used to receive the land from their ancestors, from their parents, but because of this establishment, they cannot buy the land in the area. And this is the result of, I like to show you how 4 powers of exclusion can exclude land user from their land due to the capital city relocation. The first is, of course, regulation. Basically, regulation mandates the authority to create territory and also to secure land for the capital city. Related to the land acquisition, the regulations are established based on legitimation. Public interest is above personal interest. So basically, you need to give your land for public interest, which is new capital city. So our land is considered as a personal interest. Related to legitimation, there are at least 5 legitimation used by the government to relocate their capital city. And the first is that is uncontrollably because they don't have any fraud there, earthquakes, threat of earthquakes. So they need to, if they relocate the capital city, the problem will be gone. And also, Jakarta is currently center of everything. That means now it's the center of economy, government, and education. So by relocating the capital city will reduce the burden of Jakarta city. And the third one is Jakarta city is considered as a colonial area. It was established by Netherlands that they call Indonesia. So the government decided to build a new one from Indonesia by Indonesia. That's the idea. And also, university is economically safe. It means that by relocating here, they can reduce the threat of and also by relocating this location, it will make it for economic development in different parts. So some in center here, government that it will attract more country to China. We have more influence. And also, fourth is basically implementation of regulation, and sometimes they interpret on homework when they're not really practical land. And also the market has created a situation in, for example, in Gomeroi village that there was significant increase of the land prices from usually 600 in 2019, before 2019, before the announcement of capital deregulation, the price of land is only 600, 800 hectares per feet. And now, after the announcement, the price went up to like 100 times more expensive. So this encourages the local people to sell their land, or at least leasing the land. They don't want to farm anymore. So it's more profitable for them to sell the land and buy land in some other area. So basically, they lose the land from the market. But in conclusion, before the new capital city territorialization, there was already several territories in the sub-districts such as logging, forest plantation, coal mining, palm oil, urban area, and agricultural land. Forest plantation was significantly affected by the new capital city transition. And after passing improved is locally most vulnerable. And regulation creates exclusion by rising land prices, accelerate the diffusion.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Adi?
Yeah. Thanks, Adi. Really enjoyed hearing your results. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more, if you found anything else about the reactions of the various different villages. I know one of them was a village of transmigrant people, another was a village of indigenous peoples. Did they have different types of reactions to the Ibu Kota proposal, or did they have different strategies for attempting to receive more money, more compensation? Did you get to investigate those kinds of questions?
Yeah, I did a good interview for them. Most of them mainly agree with this. This is surprising, but that's the reality. Most of both transmigrant and local people, they supportive with this relocation because they receive huge amount of money, and the land here before it was unproductive. So there was a price and disease when they plan. So by receiving a lot of money, they supporting this.
Yeah, Sophie.
Thanks for the presentation. It was great to hear about your research. When you're describing these processes here, it's striking to me that you're not really centering key actors who are making these decisions or undertaking these actions or implementing these programs. And so I'm wondering, this question talked about villages and how they're responding, but who are the key protagonists, I suppose, who are implementing this program? What are the kind of coalitions, partnerships and so on that are enabling this transformation politically, economically?
Actually, that's the cover in the presentation, but I'm still working on it.
Okay.
But basically, it's a the actors to encourage this relocation is actually the president itself. So before decided to do anything, then in this case, it's president trying to work with construction representatives to make the regulation, and then they basically they have other that starting to make this it's political decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still working.
I have another question if no one else is going to jump in. I still do not understand why. I understand why the politicians will say why. Why, but I'm looking for some real politic about why this actually is happening. There's, I guess, competing, the only compelling thing or the most compelling explanation you put up there was about this kind of nationalist idea to kind of balance or redistribute economic power away from Java.
I just can give you kind of feeling. I haven't measured it. I haven't collecting some proof, but in my opinion, it's the decision is when at that time Indonesia is in the peak of the economy. So by establishing the huge project, they can give money to many party, political party. So everyone involved, everyone happy with this. Everyone will get some money from this project. That's why everyone supporting this project. Because when we have development, we will allocate some budget to them, and they will share this project to many political parties. That's, I still it's in my mind, but I need to find more proof to score my.
And then, so the same is the case now that, like Indonesia's economy is
Now it's decreasing, right?
at like on a tipping point. Credit rating has just been downgraded.
Yeah.
The Economist is writing about a failed state that cannot continue to redistribute its welfare.
This was created by presidents of people now.
Yeah.
That's why before he stepped down, he asked for extension, third period, like Donald Trump. He wants the next period of presidency, but the political party doesn't support it. So the problem took longer. He gradually cut this budget, but still money allocated for supporting this, but not as much as previous president.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think on the environmental reasons, but taking
The same issues are there. Like
Yeah,
the city
but
will
it's a
also
bit. The
flood.
land itself is a little bit more protected. I think there's. Yeah, I just drank that Kool-Aid a little bit.
There's still going to be 30 million people living in Jakarta.
Yeah, no, that's not solved at all.
1,000 public servants living here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Any further questions or comments? If not, thank you, Ardi.
So hi, I'm Leela. I'm in my first year of my master's, and my research is looking at co-designing food sovereignty spaces with the Gomeroi community. So first, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which we stand on today. I'd also like to acknowledge the Gomeroi Nation, the traditional custodians of Narrabri, on which the land we'll be speaking of today. I also pay my respects to the elders past and present, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. There you go. All right, so my research is looking at the intersection between food security, food sovereignty, and Indigenous peoples enacting food sovereignty within the local scale. I'm interested in the Indigenous-led on-ground applications of these theoretical concepts and the guiding changes these make within food systems. All right, today I will be outlining what is food security, food sovereignty, and importantly, what is Indigenous food sovereignty, and how this relates in Australia. I will also be taking you through my aims and research questions and my case studies, as well as the final methodologies of this research. So, to get started, I'm going to be outlining these three concepts and their focus and their evolution. What is food security? So in 1996, the World Food Summit in Rome defined food security as all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences in order to lead a healthy and active life. Okay, so this emerged due to the impact of world wars, the global hunger, and the efforts to increase yield and production volume. In the 1940s, the Green Revolution was an attempt to solve these issues and the Malthusian trap, which outlines the exponential population growth, outpacing the linear growth of food. All right. This evolved into simple supply to systematic access, which is outlined by the 6 dimensions of food security. However, food security is a top-down approach to readjusting globalized food systems. In response to this, food sovereignty emerged, shifting the focus from globalized access to localized community agency. Beginning as a grassroots farmers movement through Lavi and Campesina, a smallholder farmer movement originating in South America, this is in response to the local impacts of the Green Revolution and led to the establishment of the 7 pillars of food sovereignty in 2007. This is a political movement that ultimately asserts that communities must have agency to shape their own food systems with access to healthy, accessible, and locally produced food systems. Outlining these intersections between the two paradigms of food security and food sovereignty produce a complex continuum that has emerged through my literature review. This has led to the understanding that the failure of food security systems is not productivity, but the structural development of a globalized corporate food regime. Therefore, I argue that food sovereignty, which leans into more radical politics, is a prerequisite for true local food, inclusive food security. As you can see here, there is quite a lot of elements within this diagram. It's not really meant to be understood. It is supposed to be messy. It's supposed to be complex because the intersection of these two are so complex and messy within and of itself. However, what it does show is the socio-ecological and socio-political dimensions embedded within food systems. So from here, we are now going to be looking into what is Indigenous food sovereignty. So I argue that Indigenous food sovereignty is not a new concept, but a revitalisation of a decolonial concept. It is the concept that illustrates that food security and food sovereignty were intrinsically entwined through everyday cultural practices of Indigenous land management, food acquirement, including preparation and consumption. Indigenous food sovereignty is looked at through the 4 lenses: sacred or divine sovereignty, participation, self-determination, and legislation and policy. It is important to note that this goes further than food sovereignty by stating that the right for Indigenous peoples to govern their own foodways according to Indigenous knowledge systems and cultural values. Indigenous food sovereignty is best enacted through Indigenous cultural belief of a lived responsibility to sustainable practices and connection to country. At the centre of this is community. All right, we are looking at communal rights, communal decision-making, and communal knowledges. From here, we are looking into the international ways that this is looked at within literature, all right, and how they are both conceptualised and enacted. This map shows the location of some of the key information that has come out of this investigation. And each of these regions show their own way of defining what Indigenous itself means, as well as enacting Indigenous through food sovereignty through both top-down approaches such as treaties and legislation and the impact of agency over these food systems, and bottom-up initiatives such as protections for heirloom seeds, development of community-supported agriculture, and food community gardens. Looking into Australia, the systematic lack of a formal recognition for First Nation people has caused top-down programs to consistently fail, promoting a turn toward bottom-up initiatives such as cultural community gardens. However, examples of these, such as the Native Heritage Garden in South Australia and Hume, O'Day and Brickham's 2013 research in the Northern Territory, demonstrates how these community gardens are often based on colonial ideologies of aid and intervention, as well as the conventional food practices and models for local engagement. Therefore, they often fail to be owned or led by Indigenous aspirations, or project-based temporary interventions which wind down shortly after the funding has ceased. While these projects are well-intentioned, they ultimately reveal a critical lack of deep consideration of Indigenous food sovereignty and within this food security. Community gardens are just one way to enact Indigenous food sovereignty in Australia. However, this is the main focus of my research, as it is a very common approach for localised and community-based food production. So this investigation of the literature and current efforts to produce Indigenous food gardens or gardens for Indigenous communities have led to my core aims and research questions. Through this work, I aim to analyse the process of co-design and co-production of Indigenous food systems by using Narrabri Lab's initiatives as a case study. I'll also be unpacking the limitations of and opportunities for enhancing community benefits for Indigenous food gardens, as well as generating practical and theoretical insight into food transitions that prioritise Indigenous food sovereignty while also addressing food insecurity. All right. To address these aims, we ask the questions: how is Indigenous food sovereignty practiced and expressed at the local scale? Can co-design processes improve community engagement with an Indigenous food garden? What role do community-led initiatives such as cultural community gardens play in the enactment of Indigenous food sovereignty? And what are their limitations or opportunities? All right, so this leads me to where my research is based, which is in the heart of Gomeroi country, which is in Narrabri, New South Wales. So this is roughly about 8 hours northwest of Sydney, and it is in the fertile plains of the Liverpool Plains. Known for its rich black soil, this region is a major hub for both commercial agriculture, particularly wheat and cropping, and extractive mining, all sitting under the striking backdrop of Mount Capita. So the University of Sydney also operates their Grain Research Centre that you can see at the bottom here. These long-standing relationships between the University of Sydney and the Narrabri community is the very foundation of my research. So this collaboration is driven by our partners, Auntie Lynn Trindle, who is the CEO of the Narrabri Local Aboriginal Land Council, as well as Angela Patterson, who formerly was an agricultural scientist with the University of Sydney, but now is with Open Rivers. At its core, my project is in deep relationality with the Narrabri Lab, whose building sits within the centre of Narrabri. This here is the brochure that was given to the public surrounding the project that the lab is doing at the moment. I'm working alongside this newly funded project, which is an $1.8 million project, which is dedicated to creating cultural community gardens, which centre around cultural education and native food harvesting. My research supports the development of the 2 Laos-owned sites located just outside the town centre, which serve to showcase connection to country. Creating spaces which are intentionally co-designed to revitalise cultural knowledge by growing native food and traditional medicine plants, to improve community access, but to demonstrate important local native foods to those stakeholders who join the cultural education programs. So having a closer look at Site 1, we can see that these are going to be developed in 3 stages. Stage 1 began in 2025, and it had the vital earthworks of the rips and swales, which were established to optimise water retention and management for incoming vegetation. My research significantly steps in stage 2 and 3, which focus deep on community consultation to determine what the community truly wants for this space. While some key plant species are already planted, there is an opportunity for more community-inspired plantings, as well as other infrastructure to be community-driven. There are initial concepts on the table, such as specific native plant selections, a yarning circle, and direct access to the lower river, which you can see here through this purple line. And these elements will be formally defined and shaped through the community process that will be done through my research. Now, Site 2, in 2025, the Narrabri Laut held a community planting day. So it was a very powerful day of connection, which brought together the Narrabri community, the Narrabri Laut board, as well as the Wingali Aboriginal Men's Program. So key pillars of my research are co-design, relationality, and reciprocity. I had the honour of attending as a volunteer as part of the initial scoping for my research. Within my research framework, investing genuine time to build relationships is an essential part of this research practice. The day marked the beginning of Site 2, where native plants such as quandongs, hotbush, Curradong, salt plants and quinines were established across these spaces here in the blue and purple, which is just the start. They also then started this earthworks in the start of this year as well. All right. After this community day, we all gathered back at the Lauk itself, which is shown in this photo here. And as you can see from the whiteboard here, several ideas were created surrounding what does the community want within this community garden, within these spaces. All right. But the main one was a cultural centre within the cultural community garden. So using from the community selected imagery and foundations, using my background in interior design and architecture, I actually drew up some cultural drawings that you can see on the side here. Some conceptual drawings. And they actually ended up in the DA that was sent in about a month ago now. So that was a pretty cool addition to it. Okay. So at the centre of my research methodology is co-design. So this is inclusive of relationality, relational accountability, and ensuring Indigenous priorities are at the forefront. Through collaboration, community engagement, and shared decision-making, we aim to support the revitalisation of Indigenous food systems based in local knowledge, fostering long-term agency and self-determination. The Narrabri Lauk is enthusiastic for my work to help demonstrate collaborative community design processes and the value of the community garden in order to generate evidence for future grant applications. The practice is possible through Auntie Lynn acting as a co-CI and the Narrabri Lauk as my steering committee. Finally, as a non-Indigenous woman, I acknowledge that this research is only possible due to the foundational relationships that were built by the University of Sydney, my supervisors, Dr. Rebecca Cross and Dr. Matthew Pine, also alongside my relationships that I've had the privilege of cultivating over the past couple of years. So, to put this co-design framework into practice, my research will utilise 3 qualitative methods: observation, semi-structured interviews, and workshops. So the community days that were held at the Lauk provides a vital space for observational research, which allow for informal discussion, opportunities, and collaborative engagement. I will attend future of these community days and write field notes to generate this data. The semi-structured interviews will be with the Narrabri Lauk board and other stakeholders, such as the local Indigenous leaders and managers, such as Indigenous rangers. These will focus on how personally they define what does food security look like in Narrabri, what does food sovereignty look like in Narrabri, how Indigenous food sovereignty can be enacted in Narrabri, and what roles these cultural gardens can play. Additionally, the workshops will foster broader community-based discussions around household food security and access to Indigenous foods, while also featuring a visual mapping where we're going to get participants to draw out what do they believe a community garden looks like and what is important features within this space, which should be a quite interesting exercise. We will also, navigating my ethics approval process has been an interesting one. So although originally submitting in October last year, it has only been approved this month. So that 7-month turnaround was due to the HREC suggesting in January that it needed to go through the Aboriginal medical system, which has been a systematic shift this year, that now all Indigenous research needs to go through that process, which beforehand wasn't. So that sort of added to that. Though in light of this, I am excited to say that between June and August this year, I do finally get to begin my data collection. So looking forward to that. So what is this research trying to achieve? Firstly, we will be mapping local expressions of Indigenous food sovereignty. All right, we're going to be looking at how Gomeroi food sovereignty is practically expressed in Narrabri through cultural education, connection to country, and increasing local access to traditional native food and medicine plants. I'll be evaluating community gardens as vehicles for self-determination, assessing the capacity of 2 Lauk-owned sites to move beyond colonial community garden models by centering local Aboriginal So local knowledge, relational accountability, and shared decision making. I will also be generating a framework for agency and food security. So we're going to be doing this by delivering practical and theoretical insights into how collaborative co-designed food transitions can foster long-term community agency, revitalize cultural knowledge, and directly address local food insecurity. Finally, we'll be exploring insights into governance and policy alignment. We'll be doing this through practical insights into how large funding, local government planning, and Indigenous governance models intersect during the co-design of the native food systems. Thank you. I would like to acknowledge my supervisors, Dr. Rebecca Cross and Dr. Matthew Pye, for taking me along this journey, which has been very interesting, but also that this research would not have happened without Auntie Lynn Trindle, who's, as I suggested, the CEO of the Narrabri Laut, Angela Patterson, and the Gomeroi community that this research is all based on. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Leela?
I can try.
Leela?
Really interesting, thank you, enjoyed that. I guess my question is, to what extent do you think, looking at this as like a self-contained system, like trying to create an island where things are done differently, or to what extent are you thinking about the kind of points of connection into the already existing wider capitalist food system? I'm coming at that from the kind of alternative economies literature, which says it's very hard to carve something out that's distinctive and completely unshaped. Yeah, just wondering to what extent you thought that through.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the ways that we are sort of doing it is this bottom-up approach. There are quite a lot of community gardens, whether they're Indigenous-led or not, already based within these systems because of these bottom-up initiatives. So we're sort of coming at it through that, which is technically within the current systems that we do have, but we will also expanding that into creating this Indigenous-led one where there's not many around Australia. Also, the hope is if possible, if we possibly move into a PhD, then we will also be looking at the different types of systems that are out there. So one is this community garden, but the possibility of how are other areas and people showing Indigenous food sovereignty within different systems. Yeah.
Thanks, Leela. I guess this is a kind of technical, like feasibility, boring question, but I'm just wondering, I guess I'm struggling a little bit to understand what your research depends on. Like, so do you need these community gardens to be moving ahead and therefore there to be workshops, like community planting days and things in order for you to do the research? Or are you, like where in the kind of progress of those community gardens does your research intervene, and what is it dependent on? And how do you kind of mitigate, like, you have only a year.
Yes.
And these things might not move on your schedule.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So one of the reasons why the lab has asked me to do, be part of their program is because they want to understand better how community is involved in this process. So it is throughout the whole process that my research will be used. So
they're going to build a garden, in October, by October?
Not necessarily by October, no. Okay. So what they're doing, so this is a couple of years sort of research. So they've already started. So they started last year, which is where I was doing a bit of that scoping because have ethics and things like that. But then basically I will be going in and having a chat to the community, to the stakeholders and people that are going to be benefiting or possibly using these gardens and seeing what do they want within these gardens, what would be helpful for culture and for food access and just access in general. And so this will allow, this can go alongside their project because the hope is that this information is then integrated into the creating of these two sites. So it sort of is before, but also during.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about an aspect of the methodology, in particular the concept of relationality, and could you draw out a little bit more how that's different from talking? Or, we're doing relational things right now. What specifically are you doing that's
different.
Yeah.
What does that mean in the context of this project?
Yeah, of course.
So within this type of methodology, relationality is not just us. It's not sort of me just speaking at you, and it is the reason for our semi-structured interviews and that. So I guess those observation days, but more the community side of those workshops is that it is. You will possibly have a few questions there, but it's really they are speaking to you. You are listening. And you are coming at it from a point of, yes, although this is my research, this research is here to help you. So how is the relationality between the two of us within this or within a group as a discussion? How is this going to respect both like myself, but also the Indigenous peoples that I'm working with, the community that I'm working with. And yeah, it's really about that respect base and understanding that you're sort of coming from different spaces and acknowledging those different spaces. So yeah.
Any further questions? Oh yeah, that's, yeah.
In your literature review on the map, you had so many different examples of amazing places where food sovereignty has been enacted.
Yeah.
Is there any in that literature review? Was there any like country or example that like stood out to you as doing it a lot better than we do here, or like one of the ideal places to look to?
I think one of the biggest differences is not that it stood out that one place is doing it better, but that how they define Indigenous. I think that was quite an interesting aspect of this literature that we're looking into. And then what does that mean, like especially within the Mediterranean, that Indigenous, it's not about the peoples, it's about the heirloom seeds, it's about food sovereignty and keeping them within this, like within the area that they are in and saying it is ours. They're having sovereignty over that food system themselves. So I thought that was quite interesting. But I wouldn't say that anybody is particularly doing it better. I think that top-down approach definitely helps, which is one of the reasons why we've ended up doing the bottom-up initiatives such as food gardens and things like that, because we don't have that top-down formal recognition. But yeah, I wouldn't say that there is a best. There's just very different. And from this, we're going to try and create a framework that can show how community gardens can be part of this and what are all the different areas that work within this to then maybe create a whole, what's the words there, but basically to create a whole area that, where there's maybe as place-based, there are different ways of doing this. There's not one best way,
Thank you, Leela. Please join me in thanking Leela.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Francisco Medina. This is my second year in the PhD program, and my supervisor is Kurt. He's not here today because he's teaching. But well, before joining to the program, I worked as a head of planning and development unit in a municipality, Maipú, in Chile. This municipality is the second most populated municipality in Chile. Over 500,000 people live there. In this period, I work on co-creation projects with community. I work in public space recovery and also in urban regeneration plans. From this experience, my research interests focus in three areas: public space, urban inequalities, and climate change in cities. That's why my title, Contribution of Collective Actions in Public Space in Building Transformative Urban Resilience in Santiago, Chile. So I would like to give you a context of the city. Santiago is the capital of Chile. Is located, as you can see, in the central zone of Chile. 42% of the urban population live in Santiago. Santiago just represented 2% of the national territory, and they live like roughly 7 million people in Santiago. Santiago and the central zone actually is the most affected area by climate change, suffering from heat waves, flooding, and drought. Can be this one a little bit contradictory, suffering from drought and flooding, but this is because we used to have like a steady rain season during winter, but now we have short but intense raining in short periods of time. The picture that you can see there is to show how Santiago can be different for residents, a drastic difference. The idea of the picture is doesn't show every urban inequality in Santiago, but I think transmit the idea. In Santiago, some people who live in different areas can have 10 years of life expectancy difference between them. In your right side, you can see a maps of Santiago and how vegetation is distributed in the city. You can see that it's concentrated in the right side, and this is the high-income area of Santiago. This is particularly important because the vegetation and how it's distributed can impact actually impact how heat waves affect the city. So people in Santiago can experience 8 degrees of difference in summer because the vegetation. And this urban inequality is also reinforced for other factors. For example, the budget per capita available in each municipality. The municipality with high income can have some budget which range from 1,500 Australian dollars to 2,000 Australian dollars. Meanwhile, the average in Santiago of each municipality doesn't reach even 600 Australian dollars. So this is particularly important because in Santiago, many urban services, as the maintenance of green areas, depend on municipalities. Okay. The other pictures shows an scene that is more common than it should be. So in a rainy day in Santiago can mean for some family drink a coffee, have a coffee, eat a pie, but for many others means a night of not sleeping because they have to work during night to avoid the water get into the house. So these urban inequalities and vulnerabilities are particularly important to understand and explain why some groups and some people are more affected by climate change. Okay, then as a response to climate change, urban resilience has emerged as a response. It's been consolidated as a research topic, but also as a public policy narrative to address this impact. From urban literature, more scholars define from I will say a process lens, which focus on the capacity of the urban system to absorb, recover, adapt, and eventually transform the system. This capacity is supported by some urban attributes such as diversity, flexibility, redundancy, robustness, and safe failure. In the middle, this is just an example. I have different measures to encourage or contribute to urban resilience. This is don't try to be representative of all of them, but it's just to show how some measure can be contributed to safe failure and also impact on the different components of the urban system, infrastructure and environment, communities, institutions, and economy. Of course, some of the measure, depending on the approach of the measure, can impact in different ways in the system. If we take, for example, plans to climate change, can impact in institutions, but also in economy and in public infrastructure. Yes, okay. But urban resilience has many critics. Some of them is that they politicize the problems because it's based on a techno-managerial approach, which is based on technical expertise, technological and institutional solution, also market driver solutions. The other critics is that it's a conservative concept because prioritize the stability of the current social structure over the need of transformate the urban inequalities of the city. Related to the other two critics is the urban resilience is driven by a private agenda where private sector play a key role, decide who are the beneficiaries and what is the purpose of urban resilience. So in response to these critics, some authors mention that we can approach to the urban resilience in a more normative way. So they suggest the transformative urban resilience concept, which instead of keep the social structure, try to transform them to shape or reshape the urban inequalities and vulnerabilities of the cities. This transformation is supported by 4 attributes: collective learning, social cohesion, innovation, agency, and empowerment. Well, that picture is from Chile, I almost forget. Is during some social protests in Santiago in 2019. And it's mean we don't want to go back to the normality because the normality was the problem. In some way, I think transformative urban resilience has that spirit. Okay. So as I mentioned before, there are many politics and measures to enhance urban resilience. The idea of incorporating green infrastructure in public space is one of them. According to the literature, this is a widely accepted and also promote measure because it has different benefits for the citizens related, for example, mental or physical health. From this perspective, or in this context, public space is an asset for the urban system because it's a place where green infrastructure can be implemented. So from this topographical perspective, public space is conceived as a static physical space, devoid of power struggle, social interactions, meanings, and narratives. So my research suggests that by approaching public space as an ongoing social process, we can introduce in the discussion how public space is distributed, who defines its purpose, meaning, and practices, and how decisions are made. I'm going to totally read this to make it clear, at least this part. By analyze how and why neighbors intervene in the ongoing production of public space, my research aims to explore and understand the context, narratives, mechanisms, and practices that contribute to transformative urban resilience. Public space can contribute not only to improvement in the environmental and building aspect of the urban system, but also potentially to reframe the narrative, practice, and mechanism that shape them, as well as the capacities and agency of actors who are involved in the process. I have 3 research questions to address this aim. How and why are neighbors navigating public governance to reshape them? The second question is, to what extent neighbors' intervention in public space create new context to building urban transformative resilience? And the third question is, how can institutions catalyze the impact of collective actions to build transformative urban resilience? Okay, regarding to the methods, I will collect primary and secondary data. The secondary data will be used to make a pool of potential case. I will identify around 20-30 cases in Chile This is not expect to represent all of them, but make a pool to later choose the most prominent one. From this pool, I will classify in 3 different groups. Low per capita budget in terms of municipality budget, middle budget, and high budget. So I will choose one case in each level, and these 3 cases will be analyzed. I will collect data from them, analyze using ethnography, participant observation, semi-structured interviews, and focus group. Okay, where I am? In April, end of April of this year, I submit my ethics application. Between May and July, I will still working on my literature review. In August, I will start to collect secondary data to make a report of potential cases. And in September, I will arrange once I have chosen the 3 cases, I will make the arrange to start to collecting data in Santiago. I will travel to Santiago in October until February. Then I will collect the primary data. And the next year, 2027, in the first semester, I'm planning to processing, analyzing the data, and the next 3 semesters writing the thesis. That's it. Thank you for listening.
Does anyone have any questions for Francisco?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thanks, Francisco. That was great. So you're engaging with kind of global literature about urban resilience here, but it also seems your research assumes a kind of neighborhood engagement with public space that isn't really described here. And I'm wondering particularly about, you know, like Chile, Santiago has a really important history of particular kinds of neighborhood organizing for change. You know, this happened very recently. A lot of this played out in kind of claims over public space as well. And I'm just wondering like how that particular history of collective action and practice of collective action also influences what you're talking about here.
Yes, it's totally influenced by that. I didn't put that history because I feel like I can't spend too much time talking about that. But when I come to Australia, I think one big difference is how cities are building. In Chile, many villages, I say like, I don't know, 5,000-10,000 of people, they occupy private place, they build house, they stay by the place, and that is the way they formalize the house. And the same happened with public space. So informality in Santiago, and I would say in Latin America, play a huge role in building the city. So definitely I will add all that history because also I think help us to understand the process of building publicness in public space differently than in the north. So yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah.
My question is connected and comes from far less contextual knowledge. I just wondered if you could explain why you're choosing neighbours as your subjects. Is there something specific about Santiago that, so not citizens or residents or whatever, but neighbours?
I'm working on that because in Spanish we have a word which is vecinos, but doesn't have the same translation in Australia. And I use neighbor because can be inhabitants, can be residents, but actually it was Kurt's suggestion because he know you use the word vecino because he traveled to Spain. So I have to change that word because I don't know how to explain, but
Neighbors has a kind of closeness that residents doesn't, right? Like a kind of relationship.
Vecinos, you can have a relationship between vecinos, people who live in totally different suburbs. So I think in English you don't have that word that connect with people. So if you go, for example, a council meeting where can participate like thousands of people from a range of 10,000 hosts, everyone is going to call between them vecinos. So, but I'm still working in that world. Yeah, it's strange.
I'm just wondering, throwing this out here because I'm not sure. Can you use the term vecinos and then sort of explain generally what it means and feels even between that relationship and talk about
It's like a
relationality again?
Form of urban citizenship, is that right?
No, it's totally. It's not related. That is like beautiful of the work because doesn't matter if you are right side left thinking or left side thinking. If you are regular or irregular migrant, doesn't matter. It's related to you belong to the place.
Okay. Isn't that
But even bigger place, not just your neighbor. You know.
isn't that the relationality between the people and the kind of
Yes.
context or
But as I said, I have to work on the work because before like illegal informal settlements use the word pobladores, but that is more related to the left thinking. But vecino is more transversal, so. But I'm working on that word.
What do you do about that? Any other further questions?
Not a question, but sorry. It's like one
I
suggestion.
thought we do about the word.
I actually did some research about that as well. As in the term coined by Benedict Anderson, imagine community, like something which totally stranger, but we still have something like Sydney Sider. We don't even know who they are, all of them, but still we can call Sydney Sider because we have that kind of imagined images like symbols, flags, and some maybe custom or something.
That was about the nation state though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Just one suggestion, just look at that particular.
Thank you. Any other further questions? There's nothing on the line.
There is nobody online. There used to be.
Please join me in thanking Francisco. Our next speaking space will be on June 10th, and also there's a cake event happening in the lounge area that side if you're available after this. Thank you.
Wow, you guys get it good at it.
Come on.